Welcome to NICU Stories. Hey, my NICU Story followers and listeners, thank you so much for tuning in today. I have such an amazing guest today, and I'm super excited to have her on today. We have nurse practitioner Jennifer Miller, and I'm so excited to have her on today. I brought her on because I just really think that sometimes we as parents also need to hear from a professional perspective. And she is just such a wealth of knowledge, and she has such a beautiful heart and beautiful soul, and is very passionate about the NICU families and parents. And she has some amazing information to share with us today. And she has many years of experience in the NICU. So Jenn, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Anytime I have an opportunity to share my passion with anybody, I'm excited to do it. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. So I want you to go ahead and, give us a little bit about yourself and give us the tips that you have for some of our NICU parents.
Sounds good. So I started my NICU journey in 1999. I was in nursing school, and a friend of mine's like, "Hey, we're hiring in the NICU." I'm like, "What's the NICU?" Like, I didn't even know what the NICU was. And I went and interviewed, and it seemed cool. It was like 25 cents more an hour. And in 1999, that was like a big difference. I was in nursing school. So I started working there as like a CNA, what would be, equal to a CNA. They called it something different. And I fell in love. I fell in love with the babies. I fell in love with that, because I'm in the healthcare profession, what you call an adrenaline junkie. Like, the sicker and, the more craziness that's happening in whatever unit I was in, the more happy I was. So the NICU had that, but it also had the other side. It had, babies going home and you could cuddle with them. And so I really just fell in love with the NICU right away. So I started working in the NICU as a new grad in Phoenix, and I spent my first 10 years of my career as a nurse. I worked with preemies. I worked in like a children's hospital. So I had the full spectrum of the NICU. And then it's like probably about 8 years in, I was like, okay, I want to elevate. I want to do something different. And so I went back to school to be a neonatal nurse practitioner. And a lot of people don't really know what that is. And so I'm going to kind of explain the difference. So a nurse is somebody who, any of you guys who are NICU parents know, those are the people that are taking care of your babies. They are doing their cares, changing their diapers. They're doing all of the hands-on things, doing a lot of hands-on time with you guys as families. The nurse practitioner is somebody who works more in conjunction with the physician. So during rounds, you probably saw us if you were in a hospital that had nurse practitioners. We're helping to create the plan of care. And then once the plan of care is created, we'll put the orders in, and then the nurses will follow those orders. So it's a team. It's a team of people. We work very closely with nurses. I feel as a nurse practitioner, because we were nurses, we are kind of the liaison from nursing to the medical team. At least that's how I like to look at it. So it gives, we have our experience, and the physicians have all the knowledge. And I feel like when we come together, we're doing what's best for the babies. So that's how my career started. I've now been a nurse practitioner for, let me think about this, almost 11 years. I currently work at Children's Hospital of Colorado in Denver. Have been there for just about a year. We've been in Denver about 4 years, and I've worked at a few different hospitals. One of the things that Nikia wanted me to talk about is the different levels of NICUs. And some people may not know that even exists, but in the adult world, I feel like, if you are in a car accident, for example, you go to a level 1 trauma, or places like that. So the numbers are actually backwards in the NICU, or reverse, maybe we should say. So a level 1 NICU would be kind of like a well baby, like, maybe they deal with term babies who need some phototherapy, or their sugars are a little low, things like that. And then a level 2 NICU would be, maybe they take babies 28 weeks and greater, or 32 weeks and greater. So, not the super, super small preemies, not the surgical kids, but, you went into preterm labor at 32 or 33 weeks. Those kind of NICUs are going to be able to take care of your babies. And then the level 3 NICU does most everything, but there's a few things they don't do. So they take care of small babies. Maybe they do some surgical kids, but they don't do ECMO. They typically don't do anything that has to do with babies that are born with congenital heart disease. That's a level 4 NICU. So level 4 NICU does it all. And I feel like a lot of the level 4 NICUs tend to be like children's hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I work. So I work in a level 4 NICU, but I have worked throughout my career, a level 2 and a level 3 NICU. So my passion is level 4. I, again, going back to that beginning, knowing that I was an adrenaline junkie. Yeah, I like, the crazier and the sicker the kid is, that's kind of my jam. So that's kind of an overview of the different levels of NICUs. So I kind of want to back up a little bit. I've kind of given you an overview of the difference between nurses and nurse practitioners and the different kinds of levels of NICUs. Now, you're probably wondering where, as an adrenaline junkie, did my passion for families come in, because it's very different. It's very different. So as a nurse, adrenaline junkie, I didn't really do primary care, which I hope that a lot of you parents have had that experience of having primary nurses. But as a nurse, I didn't really care to do that. It's because, like, once the babies got better, I'm like, oh, this is boring. I don't really want to feed the babies. There's other nurses that are really good at that. I'm going to go back to the sick kids. And so as a nurse, when I became a nurse practitioner, the first hospital that I worked at, that's all we did is we had a team. So, like, for example, when your baby was born, I was in the delivery room and then I was discharging you. And it was like a huge eye opener for me, because I saw the emotional roller coaster that parents went through. And I was really kind of disturbed about it. I'm like, oh my God, this is horrible. Like, these parents are going through some stuff. And I was just like, somebody should really do something to help these parents. Like, somebody needs to help these parents. And I went through in the unit saying that for a couple of years, as I continue to watch these parents struggle with, like, anxiety and PTSD and depression and withdraw. And I'm just like, there's got to be more out here for these parents. There's got to be. And so eventually that's where my passion for families came. And then I created a parent advisory council in the hospital that I worked in. And I was able to see parents come together and parents support each other. And it was just mind-blowing. I'm just like, wow, like, it doesn't change the trauma of the NICU, and it doesn't change any of those effects of the NICU. But what I saw is parents laughing. I saw parents smiling. I saw them relating. I saw them understanding each other. And I'm like, wow, this is so important. Like, because most people, like, they have friends who had healthy big term newborns, and they don't understand the NICU. Like, the NICU is this little island that nobody ever wants to go to, but once you're there, you feel so alone and isolated.
It's the truth.
So finding somebody that you can talk to about that was huge. And that was like a big eye opener to me. So I think I'm rambling now, but anyways, it was just really cool. I think one of the things that I think is important to have, whether you're in the NICU or now you're out of the NICU, is some kind of community of support. And
I agree.
Yeah. So, and I think now, because of COVID, normally you would get together and you would have people and you would hang out or you would meet up. And now it's, like this, like Zoom or phone call or FaceTime. And there's something out there. There's something. I'm going to share a story real quick about a family I was talking to yesterday at work. And I told them I was going to do this podcast with you. And she's like, well, you make sure and tell them about me, because you know that we're your favorite family. And I was just joking, but their baby just recently got a tracheostomy. And she, I'd circled back around with them, and because I hadn't seen her since that had happened. And she's like, I went on Instagram and I found this one. And I'm like, oh, is it so-and-so? I don't remember the name. And, like, we're both following the same person. And she's like, that little girl running around with her trach at 2 years old gave me so much hope. And it's just like, exactly. It's like, so even if it's something on social media to where you can at least follow and see, like, sharing your story is going to find other people that are in the same boat that you are. And who knows, maybe you guys can end up in some form of a community together, helping each other out and supporting each other.
And that's what it's really all about. And that's like the heart of NICU stories, to share your story, because exactly what her testimony is, that she found someone else with the same situation as her daughter to be able to relate to and know that you're not by yourself in this world, especially during a pandemic.
Yeah. Speaking of the pandemic, I think that's one of the things that I would like to share, because there are probably people right now going through this. And, worked in the NICU for 20 years, is, COVID, I think, has affected the NICU very differently than it has affected like the front lines. Like we are not seeing as many patients per se with COVID. We do see a handful of people here, and, babies that do have COVID. But I think where I really saw it was the lockdown of families. Like, before you could have, and every hospital has different rules, but like ours was like, I think 2 to 4 people in the room at a time. Could be your aunt, your uncle, your cousin, your sister, your brother, your neighbor down the street. Like anybody could come visit your baby and be there with you while you're in the NICU. And in the beginning, at least in our hospital, you could only have one parent there at a time.
Oh, wow.
And so I witnessed the trauma of the NICU happening with the parent in the NICU with no support person in there.
Oh gosh, that's heavy.
And it was heavy. And then, then it would change to, okay, we can have 2 people. Like it's because COVID, it's like, we don't know a lot about it, right? And we're still learning about it. It's not like, okay, it's flu season and we know that all of these 10 things are occurring, so we know that this is what we need to do. It was like a blind navigation. And so nobody really knew what to do. And so the rules changed all the time, so you had, okay, one person, and then you can switch, but you can't be in the hospital at the same time. Oh, now we can have 2. And then there's a very short period of time where I think grandparents got to come in, but that got reversed. And so my cousin had a baby in the NICU this year, and watching that really changed me too. Cause like I've had this passion for NICU families for over 10 years, but watching my cousin go through having a baby in the NICU while the pandemic was happening, their hospital the whole time, only one per day. So like if the mom went in on Tuesday, the dad could go in on Wednesday, and the only time they were in the NICU together at the same time was on the day of discharge. And they made a special circumstance for that. So that was the first time.
That's hard, especially as, mom being very nurturing and you want to be around your baby so much.
Yeah.
You would have to make a decision to say every other day. And that's hard. That's a hard one. I can't even imagine having to go through that right now.
Well, I just couldn't imagine being by myself and going through so much that you guys as NICU parents go through. Like, it doesn't help matters by any means, So I think that has been the biggest limitation. And then, I can't speak for NICU families specifically, but then it's like normally, Aunt so-and-so is bringing over the casserole because you're having dinner. And it's like, well, is it safe for Aunt so-and-so to come over and bring me anything because of COVID? Like, so that extended help that you would normally reach out to, was it okay? Was it safe because there's COVID and I'm going back to the NICU to see my baby? And, there's all of these things. And so I think I would love to, and I don't know if you've done a podcast with anybody, but to have a parent talk about their experience recently with this.
I have someone in the future. I do have someone scheduled to, tell her story about, because her baby came home in September, October.
Okay.
But I haven't heard her story yet because I kind of wanted for it to be fresh.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting here thinking like you're bringing so much light to the dynamic shift of the pandemic and being in the NICU, because not only does it hinder your experience in the NICU, which is already a roller coaster and just trying on your emotions in your life period, but it also puts a restriction on your village, which I didn't even think about, because you don't want to be exposed to outside people, because being exposed to outside people, even if it's just your family who you're with all the time, you're now putting your baby at jeopardy potentially. That's a lot to have to try to think about, because you want to keep yourself sane, you want to keep yourself healthy, and then at the same time, it's like you still need help from your family, your close, your loved ones. So tough. Oh my gosh, that's really tough.
So I think the emotional turmoil from the NICU is definitely exacerbated during this time. Like,
to
definitely
the highest levels I can imagine.
Yeah. And the thing is if you've never been it's like, oh, well, when I was in the NICU 5 years ago, this happened and now this has happened. Very few people will have that opportunity to know the difference. And so it's like, they're literally on an island. I spoke earlier about being on an island when you're in the NICU. It's like, this is an island in an island, like you are that little island off the big island, and you were like kind of stuck.
Right. Whew, my goodness.
So yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, all the things from a COVID standpoint. I was trying to think if there was anything else.
How do you kind of, comfort parents even in that, or just, all the different things that happen in a NICU, the different scenarios and situations, like how do you comfort parents in regards to, or even if that's something that you would do, or that's more on the nurses, but how do you find, um, before you were a practitioner, trying to comfort families and even comforting families now during the pandemic?
I'm a very honest, open person with the families that I work with. Like, I call a spade a spade. And I know that that style is not for everybody, but I know that if I had a family member in the hospital, I don't want people sugarcoating stuff for me. I don't want people painting this pretty picture that everything's going to be amazing, then the ball drops. So for me, I have very honest, candid conversations with the families. I acknowledge what they're going through. I acknowledge their feelings. I do a lot of like mental health checks with families. They don't know that's what I'm doing. But just kind of checking in. How are you doing? One of the biggest conversations that I have with families is saying it's okay to have PTSD with the NICU. I don't think that's something we talk enough about. And PTSD looks very different for everybody. Some people, like we had a set of 23-week twins. This was years ago, probably 10 or 15 years ago. It's a long time ago. We had 23-week twins, and it was two moms, and they just never came in. And everybody's like, why aren't they coming in? And they don't care. And we need them here for the babies. That's our staff. Like, we're sitting here, like, projecting this. We don't know. And I had a talk with the mom one time, and, had my, hey girl, I'm like, I think you've got a little PTSD. She got super angry at me, super like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, whoa. Like, don't come at me like that. I'm like, I'm just being honest with you. And that's one way PTSD. It was too traumatic for them to come to the NICU. It's not that they didn't love their girls. It's that it was too traumatic to come into the NICU. And we never had another conversation about PTSD. About 2 years later, she had her nephew die, like unexpectedly, of a congenital heart disease at like 9 months old. And she goes, Jen, I have PTSD, and it didn't rear my head until that moment. And she's like, thank you so much for mentioning that to me. So I had that conversation, and it's dads can have it too. Like dads have a very different perspective of the NICU, because, okay, if, the mom is sick and the baby are in the NICU, like how a baby is born prematurely comes in many different ways.
Right.
But oftentimes you have a sick mom and a sick baby, and you have a dad who's trying to keep it together to take care of both of them. So he's in like literal survival mode.
Exactly.
For months.
Like he has to be superhero.
Yeah. And so in my experience, dads still have the ability to have anxiety, depression, and PTSD from the NICU. It just doesn't happen for months or years later.
And they don't articulate it the way that we do, or express it the way the same women do. Yeah.
No, yeah. Because it's and I think that's just a man thing, right? Like, men are like, I'm good, I got this. No, peel the layers off. There is stuff in there, man.
But that's such a good point, because I think we focus more on moms and we don't think about how are dads being affected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dads have different, I think it's a different perspective and a different role, and but not to be ignored. So I have that conversation with both mom and dads all the time. Like, hey, just so you know, like, it's okay. It's okay. And it's okay if you need help for that. Again, the whole mental health stigma in society in general. But I think a lot of times NICU parents need permission for things. They need permission to grieve. They need permission to not be okay. They need permission to say, I need help. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, again, I think we need to talk about that more. We need to talk about the things that aren't okay. Celebrate the milestones of how great your baby is doing, or some days there's setbacks, but, also acknowledge what you need for yourself.
And I love the fact that you even take the time to do that. I was telling a few nurses that I had on the show previously, I said to her, you have such an amazing bedside manner. And I didn't get that when I was in the NICU, and I didn't get anyone asking me if I was okay. And I wasn't, because I had to travel 45 minutes to go see my daughter.
Right.
It was in the middle of the summertime. I was dealing with so much stuff. And then by the time she left that one hospital, went to a hospital closer to home, I think I literally had like a breakdown. And it was hard for me when she got home. Like I felt like I didn't really celebrate like I thought I was. I was kind of like numb, but I didn't realize it was, like a PTSD kind of thing. I didn't realize I was dealing with postpartum depression. I just didn't know.
Right.
Because no one asked, like, are you okay? How are you
Yeah.
doing? Like, I was literally just going through the motions. If anything, I was shamed that I didn't come as often as I should have, or I didn't come more often. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't come every single day. There was times like I literally was tired because I was doing so
Yeah.
much. And because we were
Yeah.
so far away, I couldn't come every day. Like some days I really had to like take a pause break, but I felt like I was mommy shamed by the staff. And it was just like on top of me already being stressed out over the situation, like I'm being mommy shamed too. So I'm glad to hear that there are staff out there who really do care about the well-being of the parents, because, the well-being of your child at the end of the day in a NICU is top priority, but also the well-being of the parents who have to bring that baby home once they're healed and ready to go home. So I'm glad that you even take the time to even think about the well-being of both the mom and the dad. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
Well, yeah, because you have to have a healthy, it's like you probably spent months in the NICU, and now it's like your baby's finally home and you're scared.
Right.
Like you're scared because you've spent months like in basic survival mode of
Exactly.
like, okay, I'm doing all this thing. And then it's like, oh my God, now I have to take care of myself and I have to take care of my baby. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. And there's no dinging anymore. And if I do hear a noise, it's probably from the monitor. Is my baby okay? Like, and then you're not sleeping because you're completely freaked out that your baby's going to die because there's no monitor. Like it's all the things. It's all the
All
things.
the things, right.
It's
And
a
my
lot.
daughter, she had chronic lung disease. So she was on the monitor she was on, intubation for a long time. And then
Yeah.
she was on oxygen for a long time. So when she came home, I really couldn't sleep because I kept looking at her like, is she
Right.
and I'm
Is she
watching her,
okay?
and I'm like trying to put my ear to her chest, like, is she breathing? So it is
Yeah.
stressful by
Yeah.
the time you get home, and you don't have the dinging to know. Because then I'm like, I wish I could bring one of those monitors home so it could let me know.
No, those are for us. I always tell the parents, I mean, it's easy to get fixated on things, and, dads tend to be more minded, like with numbers. And so they're like, well, what does that number mean? And that number's a little bit different. And, I'm like, you know what? You are not taking it home with you. You need to just look at your baby. What does your baby look like? But
Right.
easier said than me. I'm not in the room for hours on end, just staring at the numbers, looking at my baby, staring at the numbers, looking at the baby. So,
Right. And the little, what is it, a
but
pulse ox that you put on their finger?
yeah, yeah,
I was like, I
yep. The
wish I
pulse
could
ox.
bring that home so it can let me know that she's getting enough oxygen. Like I was that
They
parent
have,
fixated on those.
yeah, they have that stuff now, and they have those things now that you can buy.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the medical, I don't think the medical profession stands by them that much because they're not 100% accurate.
Mm,
But they're available. They're available, and I think we definitely, if I'm talking to the families, steer the families away like from
yeah.
getting them. But I also understand that a peace of mind is something that you need. Like I understand that.
I have to say, I'm glad I didn't know about it because I think I would have drove myself and my poor child nuts if I would have had that. If I would have had a pulse ox or some type of system letting me know her oxygen levels. But I really was thinking about it. Like, I wish they sold this thing, but I'm so glad I didn't have it because I would have made myself
Yeah,
even more crazier.
I
Um,
think so. I think so for sure.
so what kind of advice would you give to some parents? I know that you have mentioned parent to parent and some parent to parent support.
So I have a few tips. How do you deal with babies who don't survive the NICU? And I have experiences as a nurse, and I have experiences as a practitioner with this. So I don't want to end. I don't want to end on that topic. So we'll talk about that now, and then go to the fun tips. But it's interesting because before I worked in the NICU, I did work in adults, and having somebody in their 30s, 40s, and 50s die was really hard on me. Like when I was a CNA, because it's like those people had spouses and kids and like memories and all of these things. And then it's like, they're gone. And so when I started working into the NICU, some of the babies were born like disadvantaged, like whether it was too premature or whatever the situation was. And I think how I look at it is that just wasn't meant to be,
Mhm.
And some of those deaths, that's how I processed it. Others were very hard. Like,
Right.
babies can just up and die like that from, you and I chatted earlier this week about necrotizing enterocolitis and,
Yep.
how that can just, you have a cute, cuddly little baby at 8 a.m. and by 8 a.m. the next day, the baby's already gone. And those are hard. I think those are hard on the staff. Those are hard on the physicians. Those are hard on everybody because they're so sick and most of them don't survive. And that's hard. That's also a risk of being a premature infant. There's a lot of things that can go wrong.
Right.
And, I'm grateful that I have the ability to communicate with the staff that I work with. And, as a nurse, it was hard because I was spending more time with those families and engaging with those families and creating bonds with those families. And then as a nurse practitioner, it kind of changed. It came to, again, I had spoke about being kind of the middleman between the nursing and the medical team. And I feel like my role now is, okay, I need to be an advocate for the patient on behalf of the nurse. Because sometimes, there's situations to where we all know that that baby is going to die. We all know that. The family is not ready to make that decision. And that's hard. It's I couldn't imagine having to make that decision. I don't have any children, but I've always felt like, let the medical team make that decision. Like if my mom was dying of cancer, which that actually happened, and they came to me and they said, there's nothing else we can do. I got it. There's nothing else we can do. Let's get to hospice. And that's what I did. Like I was fighting. And then they're like, there's nothing else we can do. It's like, okay, I just needed the medical team to tell me that. I often think in the NICU, because we don't have that solid, 100%, this is what's going to happen. We really put it back into the parents' hands, which I think is hard. Like, I feel like we should do a better job of saying there's nothing else we can do. Like if we as a medical team know that even if we do 10 more things to try to help your baby, the end result is still going to be the same, then we should do what I call redirect care. Let's redirect to comfort care, to palliative care, to like what we would call in our adult world hospice, and so I feel like as a nurse practitioner, I can be an advocate in that direction. If I can feel the tension that the nurses are kind of like in that, we're not doing things for the baby anymore, we're doing things to the baby. How do we
the difference, that thought?
It really does. And so it's like me having the ability to go to the physician and be like, hey, what's our end goal? What are we doing? Like, what's our plan here? Putting kind of a stake in the ground, like, okay, girl, I got you. Like, I see you as a nurse, and try to figure that out. And it's hard. It's hard in those situations where you do have babies that aren't going to make it, and the parents can't make that decision. Is hard. Again, I feel like we as a medical team should do a better job of just going to the family and saying there's nothing else we can do.
Because we as parents, we would hold on to any hope of life. But I think I have to say, when you shared that part, as far as like now you're getting to the point where you're doing something to the baby and not for the baby, that makes a world of a difference when like there's nothing else we can do.
Right.
And it's hard as a parent to even think about that, but I believe that thought was given, when you have to have that talk, that very hard talk, it kind of would change the perspective. There's like, yeah, you're just doing this to my child's body now. There's nothing we can do, And I think that definitely is a key phrase, not even just a phrase, but just a thought and just a reality to be able to help make that decision. I don't want to say easier, because I don't think that's ever an easy decision to make, but
absolutely
it makes
not.
it a little easier to understand the reality and the nature of where you're at that point. So I thank you for sharing that part.
Yeah. And it's not easy. It's not easy to watch a baby die. And it's also not easy to watch a parent struggle to make that decision.
Right.
Which is why, again, and this is my personal bias. Again, I feel like palliative care in the NICU is also something, I actually did all my research for grad school. That's what I did it on, was palliative care in the NICU. I think that just because we can doesn't always mean we should, because
right.
that takes you to quality of life, and we don't know. And and quality of life to me and you and 10 other people means 10 different things,
Right.
But I think that it's something that we should definitely always just think about,
Right.
Just because we can do it, do we need to? Is that the right thing for this baby, for this family? Is this the right thing?
Right. And then at the same time, it's the decision of the parents. But I believe if you
Yep.
present that one component, like what we're doing to the baby or what are we doing for the baby, that makes a
Right.
world of a difference. And hopefully for any parent who would have to make that decision and hear that part, hopefully that will be something that would help you make your decision a little easier or
Right.
ease the stress of making that type of decision. So my
Yeah.
heart will go out to any parent who had to make that
Mhm.
decision or who's currently having to make that decision, because I really
Yeah.
don't know what I would do, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I mean, there are families that are like, even though we do say that, they choose whether it's religious beliefs. A lot of it does fall into the religious side of things, but it's like they're not going to do that. Like they're just not. And
Right.
so then they move forward, and we respect that too. You know what I mean? Just because
Right.
we feel like, hey, we feel like your child's life should stop because of X, Y,
Right.
and Z,
Right.
and you say no, we'd rather just take the risk, even though we know that his long-term prognosis isn't going to be great. Okay, cool. We go
Mhm.
down that path.
And
You
see,
know?
me being a woman of faith, I know I would be that parent like, no, I just believe God.
Right.
Like,
Right.
God, you just gonna do it. And,
Yeah,
it's a hard decision to make. And I have to
it
say,
is.
I probably would have been that parent because the first thing that my doctor said to me when I was going into labor with my daughter, he was like, do you want us to do everything possible to save her life? And I'm like, absolutely. Like, you
Right.
gotta do
Yep.
everything in your power to save my child. And,
Mhm.
when she had necrotitis enterocolitis, she was very sick. She was only like
Mhm.
2 weeks old. I couldn't even hold her yet because she had it.
Mhm.
And the doctor said, she has a 50% chance of dying. And I got this knot in my chest, like,
Mhm.
what? Like, you couldn't just say
Yeah.
50% chance of living. Like, you could go the
Right.
positive side of it. Like, we just have to go straight to the negative. But I remember saying to him, and I had my mother-in-law with me, and I said to him, I said, you know what? I believe God. And I said, you know what, we're going to pray. And I just really believe God. And he said, well, you do what you do and we'll do what we do.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
she overcame it, but that's not everybody's story. So like, I get it.
Yeah.
If you want to hold on to your faith, you do what's best for you as a parent.
Exactly.
But I absolutely love
Exactly.
that perspective from a medical standpoint. Like, that just really resonated with me when you said it in our interview. What you're doing to the baby versus what you're doing for the baby. And I really
Mhm.
believe that's such a key component that many physicians, if they don't know what to say, that they really should definitely say that. Because I think it does
Yeah.
paint a better picture and bring more reality to
Yeah.
what's happening and, you know what I mean, to your child.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if we're doing things for the patient, the baby, then you know what, there's a chance that those things are going to make a difference. But if
Right.
we're just doing things to the baby and it's not going to make a difference,
Right.
then
Right.
and I really feel too, like if the inevitable is going to happen, then what does that look like for a family?
Right,
You
right,
know,
right.
does your baby, has she never seen the sunlight? Is there a way for us to somehow get her out of the hospital room to a little garden so that that can happen? Or,
Mhm.
you can plan it, instead of what I have seen far too many times is us coding the baby and the baby has died. And then we're putting that baby into the family's arms. That's hard. Like that's
Yeah.
really hard to see, because again, we who, we experience these things, we see these things, and we know how it ends. Like we know
Right,
what it looks like.
right.
Families don't. They're hanging on. Again, totally understand that, totally get that. But
Hanging on by a thread.
then I feel like the death was very traumatic. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's 500 people in the room, coding the baby, doing all these things to the baby, chest compressions, and then the baby still dies. And it's hard. I mean, I think
Yeah,
we definitely struggle. One of the things that I really enjoy about most of the hospitals that I've worked at is we all do a debrief. Like
I love that.
after a code, we all get together. How are you, what went good and what went wrong from like a medical standpoint, because
Right,
that's
right.
always, we can always do better. But
Mhm.
then also, does anybody else have anything to say? Like, and
Right.
a lot of us cry. Like, I mean, I have definitely shed tears with families more than once, throughout my nursing and nurse practitioner career. Like, it's
Aw.
sad. It's
Yeah.
sad, it sucks. And even on the babies who need to die, because that's what's happening, it's still sad.
Yeah, it is. And how
It's
do you
still
find
sad.
yourself able to cope and still stay in this profession after experience loss?
I'm grateful that I think no matter where you work in the healthcare, a lot of the people you work with become your really close friends. And
Mhm.
so we all talk about it. My wife is also a NICU nurse, and so her and I share a lot. We're both able to really openly and candidly talk about that. So I think between the two, it's you have to have a support system.
Right, right,
Humor is
right.
also something that we have to have, not in the moment, but like sometimes you gotta laugh and have fun, because what we do is heavy, like what we do is really heavy. And so I'm definitely one of those people where, I'm definitely a smart aleck. So always got to try to keep work a little bit on the lighter side.
I love that part. That's good.
Yeah. All right. Now I'm going to go into the tips that I have for, unless there's anything else. I think we covered that topic.
No, I think we did.
Yeah. Okay. So here are some tips that I have for families. Now, this could be whether you're in the NICU or you're out of the NICU and you're home with your NICU baby. I think the biggest thing is you have to find some way to take care of yourself first. That whole put your own oxygen mask on first, then put your babies on. Now, what does that look like? I mean, I think self-care is a big word that's being thrown around now, but what I like to tell families is before you were on bed rest, or before you were in the NICU, or before all of this traumatic event started for you, what's one thing that you did for yourself that you haven't done since then? Maybe it was you took a bath at night, with a glass of wine or a book. You know what I mean? Like, have you done that? Right. Have you taken the time to do that? Or, maybe you had an exercise routine. Exercise is another thing I think that all NICU parents should do, because it releases endorphins, which is serotonin, which is positive. So trying to put something positive out of your brain and into your system will be helpful, because it's going to counterbalance all the other stuff that is happening to you.
Right.
It doesn't mean you got to go join a CrossFit gym and get crazy, but take a walk, get outside, put something positive into your brain, whether it's a podcast, whether it's an Audible, there's so many YouTube, there's so many free things available now, or like, I don't have the patience to sit down and read a book. I like Audible. So it's like, I listen to books. But, again, trying to increase those positive serotonins, or listen to the NICU stories, or, there's so many NICU support systems out there, put something positive into your brain, something that you can relate to, something that you're going to connect with. Another thing that I think is very important is meditating and journaling. Especially if you're going through the NICU. There's like, I just talked to my cousin actually before jumping on here, and I'm like, hey, are you ready to share your NICU story? And she's like, Jen, I can't even put it into words. And she's a writer. Like, that's what she does for a living, is she's a writer. And she's like, I don't even know, So I get that, but get a little journal, get a little something that you can write, especially if you're in the NICU, because there's a lot of downtime and a lot of idle time. And I think writing it down so that maybe a year later you can go back and kind of try to start processing things. Meditation, I think, again, free on YouTube, even if it's 5 minutes a day, the power of breathing and redirecting where your head is just by breathing is probably way more powerful than any of us realize. So something I'm trying to incorporate into my own life. But yeah, that's something that I would suggest.
See, I don't know if it's called meditation or breathing, but I have to say, taking that pause break to not listen to anything, it is helpful. It really is. Like, I had a mommy breakdown and I had a mommy moment, and I remember my husband saying, I'm gonna just take the kids out and we're gonna take them ice cream. And I literally sat at my kitchen table in complete silence. And it must have been breathing technique. I didn't know, but at the time I was calling it a pause break. And I literally had to not think, not have none of my senses pulled on, not listen to anything, not do anything. I literally sat at my kitchen table in a complete silence for a half hour. And it was the best experience.
All you needed. Exactly. Ever. Just taking a time out.
Yeah. I agree with that point. Just taking that pause break and just breathe, just not have none of your senses pulled on at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, if you have an Apple Watch, it has a breathe on it. So you could schedule it to go off on just 3 times a day for 1 minute, or even just 1 time a day. I joke, I'm like, it always goes off when I'm agitated. I'm like, does it know based on my heart rate that I need to pause? And
I think so.
I think so. So, there's little things like that. Like, it doesn't have to be a formal thing, informal, it can be whatever, but I just think that that's something that would be helpful.
Yep.
I have spent a lot of time talking about PTSD and anxiety. Get a therapist.
Yeah.
Just if that's something you need, it's okay. It's
It's
okay
not a bad
because
word.
no, it's not a bad word. And I was actually talking to the social workers at our hospital, and we actually there's a lot of grants like that, like specifically work on this. So University of, I think it's Denver University, University of Colorado, I forget which one, but they have a grant that they have perinatal therapists that will like do one-on-one Zoom calls with moms. And I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. Because again, social workers are great and they usually do have a lot of resources. So I think that if you are currently a NICU parent, feel free to ask your social worker, because you don't want just a general therapist. Like you definitely
Right.
want a therapist who specializes in like perinatal NICU type stuff,
Right. Right.
because I feel like it's definitely a specialty.
Oh, that's good. I didn't know that. So thank you for sharing that tip, that there's actually grants and resources for, for the
Yeah.
therapy. That's good to know.
Yeah. And ask your NICU too. Like if any of the families that are listening are current NICU families, ask your social worker what do they have for other parents in the NICU. Every hospital is different in what they have. And there's also like March of Dimes. If you just like Google preemie organizations, you're going to find a whole bunch. So
Right. Right.
find one that connects with you and resonates with you, and look locally. Again, I think because of COVID, everything is kind of online right now,
Right.
but don't be afraid to do that. And then my last take home tip is don't forget about your spouse. Don't forget that you were
Yes,
married and
that's
in
good.
love before all this trauma happened, because once you get through everything, you're going to, you need each other, and you're going to want to still like each other. So, try to do a date night once a week. I know that sounds crazy, but I feel like when people are in the NICU, it's like, that's all you talk about. That's all you talk about, because that's like your life. So that would be my thing, is not only put your own oxygen mask on, but try to remember like that love for your spouse before all this started
That's
happening.
so good. That's such a great point. I love that. Because I think
Yeah.
we're so
So
consumed with it all in our own emotions, we really don't think about
yeah.
anybody else.
Right. And I mean, and you brought up earlier about how men and women process things differently.
Right.
So yeah, you're probably like, okay, I just need to talk about it all the time. And he's like, oh my God, I can't believe we're talking about this again. I mean, we talked about it already like 5 times today. So that one, I think that one's easier said than done. But I do think it's important for you to remember that.
Right.
Maybe once a month, once every 3 weeks, whatever it is, but carve out a little bit of time. Or maybe you guys take a walk together. You know what I mean?
Right.
Do some of the things that I mentioned together
Together. Yeah, that's
to
good, Jen. That's
get
good.
out and take a walk together.
Right, right.
Talk about life. Maybe that's all you do, talk about that's in the NICU, but the two of you are out together, put your phones away, kind of have undistracted time.
That's good. Put the phones away.
Oh, I know. We are such a, yeah,
Each other.
guilty sometimes, very guilty of that.
Very guilty myself as well. Jen, I have to say, you've given so much perspective and just so many dynamics to the NICU experience that, we as parents, when we're telling our stories, we don't tell, the ins and outs. And even just from a staffing standpoint of what the NICU team goes through and what they experience and their viewpoint of,
Mhm.
the other side of what we're experiencing. And I think you just given us so much insight and just such a wealth of information. And I'm so grateful that you decided to take the time to talk with us. Thank you so much again, Jen. I thank you you just don't understand how much I appreciate you taking the time to just share with us and share your heart and share your profession with us. I really believe the families are definitely going to be empowered, strengthened, and encouraged by the things that you shared with us, and especially from just a different perspective, because not all of
Mhm.
us experienced like had a great NICU team, and to hear
Right.
you and to hear Christina from my previous show share your
Mhm.
perspective and just your bedside manner and your heart, because a lot of
Yeah.
times you're doing a job and you have to get a job done, but to be able to hear your heart and know that you guys actually do care, but you still have to do your job at the same time,
Yeah.
is such a great
Absolutely.
perspective to share with the family. So I appreciate you today and
Yeah.
taking
It was
the
my
time.
honor. Thank you for allowing me to share. Honestly. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I thank you for the tips that you gave. I know it's going to be a benefit to some of the parents that they take the time to really like apply them.
Yeah. application is much different than oh, that sounds like a great idea.
So I really value and everything that you share with us today. And once again, thank you so much. And I hope that you guys will listen to this and share with all the other NICU families and friends that you know, because this was a great information, a resource of what Jenn shared with us today. So once again, thank you, Jenn, for sharing with us. And we really appreciate you here at NICU Stories.
You're welcome.
All right. Have a great day, guys. Thank you so much for listening to NICU Stories.